Episode 84 of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by OmniPod. If I told you I was interviewing a guy today who had type 1 diabetes, you'd say, "Hey, Scott, that's great. That's why I come to this podcast." What if I told you that that gentleman also has a son who has type 1 diabetes? Then you'd be like, "Wow, Scott, this is like double downtime for type 1 diabetes. Thank you for making the podcast." I'm sure you'd say something like that at home. But let's go one farther, shall we? How about if the guy being interviewed today is Todd Hobbs? How about if he's a doctor? How about if he's worked in diabetes? How about if he has diabetes, has a son who has diabetes, and is the chief medical officer in North America for Novo Nordisk? I blew your mind, didn't I? Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Now, without further ado, I give you Todd Hobbs.
So this is Todd Hobbs. I'm the current Chief Medical Officer at Novo Nordisk in the U.S., and I've been with the company around 12 years. And it is truly a job that I enjoy every day because I don't think of it as a job. I think of it as my life, and my passion is around diabetes. I've been diagnosed now as type 1 for over 27 years and did practice in the area of intensive diabetes management in Kentucky for about 10 years. And I do have a son now who's 12 who was diagnosed when he was age 5 with type 1. So it is an everyday challenge, but also an everyday, I think, a good feeling that I know that I can help impact others' lives with diabetes in some way, shape, or form.
So how old were you?
Glad to be on.
I'm really glad you came on. Thank you so much. It was a struggle to some of them happen so easily, and some of them get rescheduled so many times, and you were definitely a reschedule. So I'm glad it worked out. Yeah. How old were you when you were diagnosed?
So I was a sophomore in college. I was 18, and certainly didn't think at that point I was I was invincible. I didn't think I had anything that could ever slow me down. And sure enough, over a holiday when I was home, I was going to the bathroom a lot and didn't even put two and two together because there was no one that in my family that I knew had type 1 diabetes, and went to the doctor for an actual a physical, if you will, to work a few weeks over the holiday, and they did a urine drug screen and also a urinalysis, and they looked at me and said, I think you have diabetes. So I caught it fairly early and was able to get on therapy pretty quickly, and had a pretty long honeymoon phase before I went on more intensive management in my college years. When
you were a sophomore, were you declared already? Were you pre-med, or were you still deciding?
Ever since I was younger, I thought I wanted to go into medicine and be a physician. I had friends that also the same, so I really thought that I would do that, and this, I think, really solidified the fact that I would. Then the question was what specialty, because I went through a phase where I clearly said I don't want to take care of diabetes patients every day. That would be putting it in my face that I have diabetes. But then once I got into different areas of medicine and trying to decide, I knew I wanted to take care of children and adults and all types of disorders. So I went into family medicine. And then it was actually, I found it to be very, if you will, therapeutic, but also passionate to be able to share with others that I had diabetes. And then my practice actually therefore gravitated to the fact that I had a lot of patients with diabetes, and then I went ahead and opened up a diabetes only where you had to have diabetes to be part of the clinic. So I did that and really enjoyed it.
So are you a family practitioner or are you an endo?
So I'm a family practitioner, and that was my choice in residency, because I didn't really believe I wanted to take care of all diabetes patients. But then when I was practicing, certainly intensive management of diabetes, it was including pumps and children that were newly diagnosed, as well as type 2 patients who were elderly. And I was asked to be the chairman of the medicine department at a regional hospital in Kentucky, and also that's when I started up my diabetes practice for all ages. So I did intensive management in the hospital as well. I did consultations and drips, and I was functioning like an endo, but I was really just diabetes specific.
That's really interesting. I was just talking with someone yesterday, and this sort of came up that this person said they had anger with their endocrinologist because they were having issues they couldn't get worked out, and they were sort of focusing that blame back on the endo. And the person I was talking to then said, they kind of figured out over time, it's not the endo's fault. But I kind of retorted and I said, I think it's almost an unfair situation that endocrinologists that don't have type 1 are put in, because, they're asked to talk to you for 10 minutes every 3 months to see some graphs, look at some data, listen to your story for a couple of minutes, and try to make an adjustment to something that honestly you need to be with 24 hours a day to adjust. Do you think that endos that don't have type 1 are at a disadvantage?
Oh, sure. I think any physician who is treating a patient with type 1 that doesn't have it, or at least have a close family member, may not really appreciate the almost every minute of living with it that you're thinking about it. And it is an unfortunate situation where they only have a few minutes to work with their diabetes patients, and they're basically having to look at numbers and think about how they can help with the numbers. And really, as you know, you and I both know, it's not all it's about numbers. It's about, how do you live your life with this and manage it. And it's a lot more than just making some adjustments on a graph or on a set of numbers. So I think I'll say it's an advantage if they do have type 1, and it can be a disadvantage, especially if they don't really try to think of the practical side of what they're talking about with the patients and how that's going to impact their lives.
So how do you today? How do you manage your diabetes? Are you using a pump or a glucose monitor or anything like that?
Yes. So I've been on a pump now for let me think here, 15, 16 or more years at least. I've been on all kinds of different pumps. And originally, I remember thinking that I didn't want to go on a pump because I'd be attached to it, and that would remind me of my diabetes. But then I found the pump was amazing compared to the daily injections. And then probably now almost 4 years or so at least, I've been on a sensor with the pump, and I can't imagine not having the sensor available because it's made managing the hour-to-hour, day-to-day changes so much easier. And but even knowing what I know, had to emotionally evolve to the fact that I needed those things. And I actually saw the same exact thing with my son when he was diagnosed, and he was on shots for a while and was resistant to even talk about a pump, didn't want to wear that thing. But then one of his buddies at school that he knew got a pump, and then immediately he came and said, "Dad, I want to go on a pump." And then very same thing with the sensor. He didn't want to wear another thing, and he already felt like he had the pump, and then went to camp and saw some kids with sensors and said, "Hey, this is pretty neat. I want to try this." So now we're both on pumps and sensors together. So
it is really interesting how not just kids, but anyone really, you can want to do something and even know that you think it's going to be a good idea, but until sometimes you just need a push, from somewhere, somehow, somebody to say, "Hey, look, I have it too," or whatever it ends up being, so you don't feel quite as alone. It's just really, I think it's the kind of the core of why the community is so important, because it allows other people to see people who are probably just a couple of steps ahead of them on the same path. It makes things look a little more reasonable and
I also think with type 1, as you very well know, that you do get into you try to get into as much of a routine as possible, and you get very comfortable and attached to your current system, whether that be injections or whether it be a pump, certain brand of pump, for instance, and you get, it's like your second nature, and you don't want to change that because you know that, well, if I make changes to what I'm very comfortable with, it may mean that there's some adjustment that goes on, or maybe it won't be as good as what I'm doing. And so there's always hesitancy, I think, in type 1s like myself to change what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis because you get so comfortable with it.
So do you still feel that way now? Or, for instance, when an algorithm becomes available for your pump as a closed loop or an artificial pancreas, do you think you'll try it?
Yeah, I've already talked to my friends at Medtronic about what the thought, because I'm on a different brand pump, and so what I would need to do, and so that is one that I'm very excited, and we work very closely with JDRF and Aaron Kowalski. They're I know JDRF and him personally are excited, but we're excited. I'm excited about that technology now. Just as any technology is going to be. There will be improvements. There will be advances. There will be different versions that come along that are better than what's probably approved now.
Sure.
but it's exciting that it's something we've been talking about or waiting for. I have been talking about and waiting for many years now. So
no, I think
it's finally coming around.
It's like seeing the sun come up after 6 months. I think it's just very exciting. If nothing else, even if it's not your pump right now, or you're one of those people, like for me, a higher target number is sort of a non-starter for me with my daughter. Like I don't want her target to be 140, for instance. But at the same time, it's all right there now. Like it's so close and coming, and it feels real all of a sudden. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, and I also understand with these type of approvals and launches that we don't want to be so excited that we're disappointed when it's in our hands, because there will still be the user interface with entering food and carbs, and there will still be times when things happen that you have a low or a high that this new system won't be able to prevent. So we also have to be realistic about how this will be used and how practical, but certainly I think better than what we have now.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Yeah. I'm a very big proponent of keep moving. I never want my daughter to be the person who looks down at her gear one day and goes, wait, nobody does it like this anymore? Because it's just, it's the technology, like you said, that makes everything so like incredibly possible. So, okay. Well, so, all right. So you and your son, so I have one more question about you and your son, actually. So, is there other endo issues or endocrine issues in your family line, or are you guys just the lucky two, or can you look back and see even other?
No,
like
there really isn't. It's interesting. There's maybe a few hints of type 2 in some of my grandparents and their parents, but certainly nothing autoimmune. So yeah, you wonder why why did I get this? But yeah, I had a classic virus that happened sort of fall of this time of year of my sophomore year, and had a GI bug and got over that. And then looking back now, I realized that I was falling asleep in some of my classes early because I just thought it was boring because it was botany. And then at night when I was trying to stay awake and study, I would, as a college sophomore, I'd reach for Mountain Dew or Dr. Pepper to, with some caffeine and sugar to try to keep me awake, and didn't know that, in fact, this was making it worse. And so yeah, when I was actually lucky. I think that when I came home for the break, I was able to. They did a urine screening and found it, and I got right in. I knew my doctor well, so got right in and saw him and diagnosed
I have to
pretty
ask,
early.
Getting diagnosed in college and then basically going back to school. Did you go right back, or did you take a break?
No, I was so different times in regards to the healthcare system as it is now. My sugar, if I remember, was, I think, in the 300 range. So it wasn't some kids, unfortunately, diagnosed when they're, maybe DKA or much higher. So really, this day and age, I probably wouldn't even thought about being in the hospital. But in that day and age, with insurance and the way it was, and I was admitted to the hospital for more or less education. So I was there, I think, 4 days, overnight for 4 nights or more during the break, just to get, understand diabetes, and they'd come in and talk about the diet and carb counting and all that. So I went right back.
And were your parents ever really involved? I guess not, probably, right? You were just sort of on your own, I guess, to start?
From a diabetes educational standpoint and learning about it, mostly it was me. They certainly were very, very supportive in regards to whatever I needed with, at that time, meters were, you had to just buy one, and the test strips, they weren't covered by insurance, and I was lucky that they were helpful there. And as a protective mom would be, every time I got a little more ketchup or something that she thought I wasn't supposed to eat, I heard about it. But so yeah, my doctor at that point was one of the best things I remember him saying to me was that, don't be afraid to try different foods or different situations, but just make sure you're testing your blood sugar so you know what happens. And he said everybody may react a little differently to potato chips than others, or pizza or whatever. And he said, just if you don't test, then you're going to be in trouble. But if you have a little bit of this or that, and then you test, you can see how it affects you. And probably some of the best advice I got. So I never had the I guess the irritation or the hesitation to do the finger sticks for some reason. And I'm very lucky. My son also has never complained about that, which is really a blessing.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, the advice you get from your doctor, it's funny, is I think about what I do on my own with my daughter, and what I would say to other people who would ask is that, one of the main things I say all the time is, you sometimes you do something and it goes not the way you want it to, you think of it as a failure. I never think of it like that. I think of it as data for next time. You know, like I did this happened. All right, I maybe should have done more, or maybe I needed a longer pre-bolus or something like that. I never, ever think of it like, a disaster. I always think of it as just, this is something for next time.
Yeah, and there's two things on that I think are interesting. One is that I saw families where they would be really wanting to stay on top of everything, and they would come in and they would say, look at these numbers, and we did the same thing here as we did the day before, and we took the same dose of insulin and ate the same, and why did her sugar go so high here? And especially at the time, we didn't have, the newer insulins. We had Ultralente, which the insulin itself could be very unpredictable. So a lot of times I would reassure them that it's okay, and you can't control all these things, and as long as you recognize them. And that's incredible. The other one is about the data, which I think is very important, is I would tell patients, it's your job simply to put the numbers down for me. It's my job as your physician to help you figure out where we can improve upon them. But if you don't give me any information, it's going to be really hard for me to help you. So, and I would see people really worried about, I think these numbers are too high or this or that. And I said, that's my job to help you figure out. Just, your job is only to just test, put it down, let me do the thinking in regards to, how we can improve upon them. So it is just data. So once I did that with a lot of people, they opened up to not being so worried about certain numbers. It's
amazing how the glucose sensing has changed things now. I think of our endo appointments now, honestly, as where I get my daughter's A1C done. We go in and I go in and I say, hey, look, she had a growth spurt back in May, but I took care of it with more basals, and we did some boluses overnight, and sort of that sort of thing. Like I almost tell her what happened and how we fixed it. And, and I can show her where it is, but I think of her as the A1C lady at this point. Like it really is, it's very interesting. They ask you more questions, or I get asked more questions that I feel like are for her other patients than they're about me anymore. It's really
sure.
Something.
Well, you're probably a resource for her to bounce things off of in regards to that. And unfortunately, I don't think all families with type 1 child are that eager and that involved in some of these things. So those are the ones we want to try to help and give them the resources and information to have them know more and be able to handle more of these things.
Well, that's what this podcast is for. It's why I got started. And I can tell you, I get back, the blog's been great. My blog's been up for 9 years, but I've never gotten so much correspondence from people about the value that they're finding in the information as this. So you just sharing your story will help somebody. But you're here
I always said my easiest job was when I had a patient or a family come in and say, I've learned about this, and I think I need to, improve or do this or that. If they just had the motivation to learn about the diabetes or learn about the problem, that was half the battle. I could easily get them where they needed to be. It was the ones that were coming in that were resistant to changing or learning or figuring things out, that was the one where you had to try to motivate them to do this. The motivated individuals were fantastic. You can, I can use my experience and help them get where they need to go. So that's the battle.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much I agree with what you just said, and it makes me think of something that I saw this week. I saw online. It was a private Facebook group, and someone put up a 24-hour graph from their child that just it was like the Rocky Mountains, and then they wanted people to share. And before long, I noticed that the thread just seemed like, here's my bad graph too, and I felt like it was more about feeling okay with the bad graph than finding answers for it. It can be so easy to fall into a place where you say, this is just what diabetes is, and I'm trying really hard, so this must be as good as it gets. Instead of hopefully recognizing that, it's funny, I say this sometimes, and I hope it doesn't sound crazy to people. I find it easier to keep my daughter's blood sugar lower and stable than I do fighting with highs and lows all day. I actually think it takes less of my time and my attention. Once you learn how to get it to a spot and keep it there, it doesn't take as much effort as it does to like fight with a 350 blood sugar for 5 hours, for instance.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the large swings are very, because they cause counter-regulatory or counter changes that then on the other side of the swing, you've got to battle that either coming back from a low or coming back from a high. So absolutely, much easier to try to keep things stable at any blood sugar level than it is trying to fight the swings.
Yeah, it's that being able to find that place and stay in it, I think, is so much about your attitude, I guess, about it. Like, if you had a crazy graph and you thought to share it online with somebody, I would share it and say, hey, can anybody tell me how to fix this? Not can anyone commiserate with me here. Like, I mean, I guess the commiseration's important sometimes, but I guess you get what I mean. So, but okay, so we're having you on for a specific reason, though. You want to talk about some books that Novo Nordisk has?
Sure, and so we, along with I'm sure many others at JDRF, recognize that the books and the information available in particular for children, but newly diagnosed families, etc., maybe wasn't quite as specific for that age or that individual situation as it needed to be. And so the need was recognized, and we worked with the JDRF over the past few years, in fact, to make sure we had the best quality, but also the most accurate information that was correct and accurate, but also that could be tailored to many different situations, including families that are newly diagnosed that maybe have not ever heard of even diabetes and don't know what it is, all the way up to, and I kind of laughed about this one, about the college-age students. I said, I'd like to get my college-age student to read anything, let alone a booklet. But, we're trying to, this day and age, it's, if you can put it on the smartphone or something. But, so all of those different situations. And as you know, the needs and the conversations and the key points change as you go through these different ages and these different situations. And so I think we're very happy with the end result and what's come out of this, obviously relying on JDRF a lot for that expertise to make sure that we have the right information, and then hopefully these will be used by those in many different situations.
How are they available?
How are they available? There, you can go online and actually from their Cornerstones for Care, and you can download a copy to print. And you can also, in doctors' offices, we're going to work with JDRF and our reps especially to have those available in doctors' offices. When
do you think that'll start, seeing them in the offices? Do you have an idea?
When will it start in the offices? It will be, I think it's there. They should be there now. Maybe that one office doesn't have them and we can request them, but they should be already equipped. Our sales force and reps should be equipped to drop those off.
Is it a series of titles, or is it just one book, or?
No. So it's a series of titles. So they have, I'll actually read them to you. So we have newly diagnosed, which is just general diabetes. So, basics of type 1, essentially. Then we have one which is specifically geared for parents and caregivers, some of the considerations that go into stress of it, but knowing how to recognize some of these things in your child or your family member. Then we get into the age specific. So we have 2 to 6, which highlights DOT, which is your new friend, which is the blood droplet that will take you through the story. Then we have 7 to 11, sort of the preteen or tweens, I guess, ages, going through some of the key concerns there. That's a tough period of time. Not for me, I was actually older than that, but that's when I see a lot of families where you want your child who has diabetes to start to do some things on their own and take some maturity and they're, but kind of afraid to completely let them go, and there's a lot of that which comes into play in those years and/or a little bit older. And then we go into the true teen years, 12 to 16, which talks about some of the lifestyle things at that age that they're getting into that affect their glucose, how to interact with peers, those sort of things. And then lastly, the one I was kind of laughing about was the college, going off on your own, where you're truly, this is independence. This is how you're going to have to think about your diabetes on your own. So, and I do have to, I think it's a funny joke, but so my 19-year-old who does not have diabetes, but he's in college, I say, if it's in a booklet, he may pick it up here and there, but if you could somehow put, little lessons on the screen of the TV, like on ESPN Sports Center, every day, I think he could learn astrophysics if he did it that way, on the ticker. So
this summer, our son Cole is a junior in high school, and this summer he was supposed to read Macbeth. And at one point I said, "How did you enjoy Macbeth?" And he's like, "Oh, I did," and everything. I said, "How were you with the, with the Old English?" And he goes, "Oh no, I listened to it." And I was like, "Wait, you listened to it?" And I said, "So you didn't read it?" He goes, "No, I listened to it." And I said, "Well, how was the Old English?" He goes, "I listened to a version that wasn't in Old English." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So
yeah, it's a different world. I still read the hard copy newspaper every morning, but everybody laughs at me.
So, okay, so that's really so. You guys, so this is a collaboration with the JDRF?
Yeah, it is a partnership, and we we obviously have the resources to be able to put this on our Cornerstones for Care site to distribute these to doctors' offices, and we look to them for obviously the content expertise in regards to all of these different topics around type 1. So I think it was a really nice partnership to be able to get the end result we have.
Well, that's great because there's, you need good material because a lot of times there's a lot of good intention by some of the things that happen. And then when you actually look at it, you think, who is this really helping? And so when you see something that's actually valuable, it's even more so. So that's wonderful. And we'll get links and we'll put them in with the show notes and everything so people can click right on them and go check it out.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and also, even if you have the best resource that's there now, if you think about, especially in type 1, in 4 or 5 years, it's going to be a little bit outdated perhaps, and you have to update it. So a lot of it's simply just getting with as current as you can with information because it has changed. I mean, if you look in the past 10 years, there have been remarkable changes that have occurred in how we look at type 1 being treated. So
yeah, and having it digitally available like this too allows you guys to make adjustments to it as it works. I mean, when I threw out the book with the Pink Panther on the front of it that I never opened, I bet you the information inside of that was really old.
Exactly. Yeah, and the Pink Panther's done a great job for
a long time.
Many patients through the years, but it's all every time. Every year, we really should think about updating and look at what we have.
Oh, certainly. So, I mean, Todd, listen, I talk about it here, so I don't have a problem saying it out loud, but we're over 3 years now where my daughter's A1C is now between 5.7 and 6.2 for 3 years. And prior to a glucose sensor, prior to an insulin pump, I struggled to keep her like under 8.5. And I wasn't any less interested or, inclined to be available. I was always with her. I've been a stay-at-home dad for almost 17 years now. And so but when you add that technology, it just speeds everything up. What took me 2 years to get comfortable with, I'm now seeing people get comfortable in less than 3 months. And that's just amazing. That's it's such a great thing because after a couple of years, we talked about it earlier, you can kind of get beaten into an idea of like, well, I guess this is just what it is. Like, I mean, I'm trying as hard as I can and nothing's working. So maybe this is what diabetes is. And you see people over and over again say, oh, here's a spike. Well, I guess this should be expected because my kid was doing this. And I think, no, my kid does that too. And you don't need a spike there. But without certain technologies, certain understandings that those technologies bring, it just takes so long to figure it out. And you can get worn down by the time you get to the lesson, I guess. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah, and one of the things I would always tell families of newly diagnosed, but if I was seeing them in the first year, I would say that your child, diabetes does not define your child. Some kids are redheaded, some kids are left-handed, some good kids are good at math, some kids are good at sports. Your kid has diabetes, and you just need to learn or figure out how to make that in the background, if you will. You have to do a lot of thinking along the way, but it's, if you struggle and stress at every one of these little blood sugar numbers that pops up, that's going to really wear you out at some point. But you want you and more importantly, your child to really, define who they are outside of diabetes, because it's not diabetes that makes them who they are. So I've tried to do that for my 12-year-old now, and he's had it since 5. So it's not always easy, and he's sometimes I don't think he's paying as close of attention to his numbers as he should, but you got to think about the best way to work through that. And so
I think that's part of the age too. I mean, well, not that it's just part of the age. I know people of all ages who struggle with that with their type 1. I think it's part of being human and not wanting to have your nose up something constantly 24 hours a day. But somebody just asked me yesterday, like, what's a great piece of starting advice for somebody? And I was like, start over all the time. Just don't sit here at 9 a.m. worrying about what happened at 3 o'clock. You fix that. It's over. You can't go back and beat yourself up. It's easy to say, harder to do. But I think it's important to just think of it as now. What's your blood sugar now? How are you going to act now? So and learn from the last time. I noticed when I was, I guess, LinkedIn stalking you, that I don't know if that's actually a thing, but kids say whenever you look at somebody online, children consider that stalking. I don't know if you know that or not, but okay. I don't agree. I was just trying to find out about the guy, and he goes, "No, that's stalking." I'm like, okay. So, but back towards the beginning of your time with Novo, you were involved in future insulin projects, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the insulin pipeline, because as much as we sit here and talk about artificial pancreas and glucose monitors and everything, in my mind, a true smart insulin makes almost everything obsolete. So is that a real thing, or is that like a transporter on Star Trek? Would it just be cool and it's never going to happen?
I'd love to be able to tell you if for certain what if it is on Star Trek, or if it's actually realistic, and we're pushing forward with what you call a smart insulin. Let me back up just a little bit, but I do in my role now certainly work with all of our products in development, and so we have certainly what we think right now is probably the best daily injectable basal insulin in degludec, or Tresiba is the brand name there. But we also recognize that maybe we could get a little bit faster or a little bit quicker in the system on a rapid acting insulin. Especially in regards to the technology that we're seeing now in insulin pumps and closed loop systems. That we've talked to many individuals who say, yeah, the algorithms are really good, but you still have to anticipate the time, the food, and all that. And a faster insulin there could really make a big difference in controlling the meals. And so we do have a faster acting insulin aspart, which is with the FDA right now. So we are anticipating a decision really in the next couple months. So we believe that will offer better management for the postprandial, post-meal period for anybody if they're on injections, or in particular if they're on pumps or sensors.
It's time for an ad from OmniPod, but I haven't done this in a while. So instead of me telling you how great the OmniPod is, let me read you a note that I received recently. Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for the podcast. My type 1 and I went in for our quarterly appointment today. We are about 22 months into this journey. I have always gone in desperate for the doctor and the nurses to help me, to teach me, to say something. But over the summer, I really started to listen to your podcast, and I've started to exchange my fear for something else. My son and I are more empowered, making decisions on boluses and basal adjustments based on our Dexcom information. Today, A1C was 6.2 down from 7.3. The doctor looked at the information from our OmniPod and Dexcom and declared that the data looked almost like a non-diabetic's. They even called in the nurses to celebrate with us. We're not perfect, we're not even close, but I'm not really scared anymore. I'm still kind of tired most of the time, but even that is getting better. Thanks for your help and encouragement. Sincerely, and I'll take out the name. This podcast exists because of OmniPod, because they're able to buy an ad on it, because you guys are going back and you're trying out the demo pods. They're staying with putting ads on the podcast. You're trying out the demo pods. It goes back and forth, and then people like this send me notes to say that their A1Cs are going down by over a point, that they're having just better luck, there's less fear, they're doing better. So for OmniPod's ad today, I'm telling them thank you for sponsoring the Juicebox podcast. And if you'd like to support that, go to myomnipod.com/demo and try a free, no obligation demo pod. It supports the podcast, which supports me, which supports people like you. It's a big blue happy circle of diabetes love. myomnipod.com/demo.
Now, getting to your next question, most of diabetes, obviously by just numbers, is type 2. So a lot of our products naturally in the pipeline and near term are going to be more geared to type 2 GLP-1 agents, like Victoza, but also there's one semaglutide, which is a weekly injection. But we did recently announce, and there was something in the Wall Street Journal, I believe, in the last couple of days, that our researchers have been working many, many years to develop what you in your mind would think of a smart insulin, and an insulin that would be able to only lower the glucose when it's high or not normal.
That is what I mean.
Yeah. Somehow or another stop and eliminate your risk for low blood sugars. Because let's face it, if you didn't have to worry about the seesaw effect of having too low blood sugars, everybody'd be on insulin probably, and we'd increase that to to where we needed to go, and nobody'd have to worry about lows, and A1Cs would be normal. It'd be a great thing, but that's really a challenge physiologically in the body to be able to do that. I can't really specifically speak to some of the ways they're looking to make this type of smart insulin, but what I can say is that two things. One is it's very challenging, but the second is that we are having some success to where we're going to move into trials in real people over the next year or so.
Well, that's
still
exciting.
Many years away, though, I'll say, and who knows how it's going to work, and what other issues may arise. But we are pursuing that. We are certainly looking at that.
But the one that you talked about first, the one that you're hoping to hear back from in the FDA, I'm assuming like you're talking about like Q4 or Q1 of 2017. Like that's through clinical trials. That's you're hoping to get an okay to go to market. I'm sorry. With the faster. Go ahead. When you first started, you were talking about the faster acting insulin, and you were saying you were hoping to hear back from the FDA soon in the next couple of months. Is that to go to market? You're waiting to hear back?
Correct. So we filed the product with FDA, and they're doing their review now. So if it is approved, if they agree, yes, it would be launched and marketed in the U.S. So we have their approval. Obviously, it's not available.
Yeah. Does that have like a first dog name on the street grow up generated name, or do you guys have a name?
No,
not yet.
No, the name is still being worked out, and with any name of a product, it's very complex. Believe it or not, there's quite a bit that goes into it around medication safety. That if a doctor or prescriber writes it in longhand, does it look like another medication out there? If they verbally say it, does it sound like another medication out there?
Oh, that's interesting.
Can it be confused? So there's a whole lot that goes into finding a suitable name for a product. And so the generic, if you will, it's called faster acting insulin aspart.
Well, let me suggest partnering with DC Comics and going with Flash if you can. And
yeah. If only the FDA would allow DC Comics to help us with the naming, we probably would do that.
So because what you said earlier, I mean, if for people who are listening and trying to understand why that's important, I was speculating long term with insulin that would just say, hey, your glucose is higher and I'll work now, which is obviously kind of is obviously a long way off with current technology. But the idea of faster acting all of a sudden takes away from so many different problems. So all of a sudden, remembering to pre-bolus isn't an issue anymore. Having a small kid who you can't trust to eat a whole meal isn't an issue anymore. So you could give, a bit of insulin up, when they started eating, and, 10 minutes into the meal, when you realize, wow, they're really going to eat this whole thing, you could give the rest of it without there being some, 20-minute head start for the food. I would also think that faster acting would mean faster dissipating, which would mean probably less lows later on. Am I right to say that?
Yeah. So let me speak to a couple of those points.
Yeah,
absolutely. We think the current rapid acting insulins, including Novolog, which we make, are good, but they ideally should be given 15 minutes or so, 20 before you start the meal, and to really be able to stop that rise of glucose, sugar, or after the meal. And we know many patients, including myself, that's challenging. That if you don't know what you're going to eat, you don't know when you're going to get to the table at the restaurant. If it's a toddler who you don't know if they're even going to eat much, that's just not possible. And dosing insulin after the meal is acceptable, but it's never as good as doing it up front. So we do think that the faster onset of action is going to be an advantage in that situation where you can truly take it right as soon as you're starting to eat. And we have data looking at taking it after you start to eat by 20 minutes, and it's the same. So it's doing okay there 20 minutes later. In regards to, I think what we call the tail, or the, how long it's around, it actually has a very similar tail to current rapid acting. So as you know, Afrezza, for instance, is very fast in and is fast out. It's gone very quickly, the inhaled insulin. This one is around similar to that of Novolog, of Aspart, but it doesn't appear to increase the risk of lows. So it's actually very similar, or the same risk of lows there. So you're going to get better meal control with not an increase in low blood sugar. So I think the data has been good that we've submitted, and we'll see how the FDA feels about it.
I have to say, I would try that with my daughter when it was available. And full disclosure, we don't use Novolog, so I would definitely, but I would still, I would try it immediately. If that's the case, it's a huge, sure. It's significant. Even when controlling a high blood sugar, when you get in that spot where like your blood sugar is 200 and you bolus, and then you wait, and you don't see it move, and you think, is it 200 maybe because my sight's getting old, or is it and then your brain starts going through those 9,000 things. If you could trust that this insulin's going to go in and you're going to see motion, in a pretty set amount of time, and it doesn't happen, then all of a sudden you can start going through other ideas, and it's hard to talk about all the real world applications of just it working quicker. And how much help that is to a person. So that's really exciting. And I look forward to it.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the market, if you will, of diabetes products, including insulins out there, many would say, well, is this going to really make a big impact in type 2 patients, for instance, mm-hmm. or, from the marketplace? And we recognize that, possibly really not, but it is still really an unmet need for those patients, like we kind of talked about, who this faster onset is going to make a difference. Type 1s, pumps, pumps, closed loop systems, toddlers, all those things. So we do feel like that it's the right thing to do to continue to try to develop improved insulin.
Yeah, for sure. And there are more and more type 2s are moving to insulin pumps too. So I would think that would be helpful to everybody at some point or another. And I was just talking to a woman the other day with type 2. And she was an older woman, and she was asking me for my advice. She got up in the morning, had her meal, and didn't take her insulin because her blood sugar was 77, and that just scared her too much. She said she couldn't bring herself to give herself insulin when she was 77, and then 45 minutes later her blood sugar was 350, and now she's like, well, do I take my insulin now? Like, what do I do? And it's just she's using insulin for her meals with type 2, and I would think that in a situation like that, if she's 77 and really couldn't bring herself to do it, she could have waited 10 more minutes, been 100 after she ate, started to eat or something like that, and then had the confidence that her blood sugar was moving up, and then I like to talk about it like the carbs and the insulin kind of having that tug of war, around a reasonable blood sugar. And I can just say I can see a ton of applications for it. So I am very excited. I am going to make a note for myself to try flash insulin when it comes to market. Yeah. And I'm sure you guys will come up with a name that sounds less fun.
Yeah, we hope.
Well, Todd, I don't want to keep you any longer. It's coming up on lunchtime for you, and we covered everything that I wanted to cover. So just let me say thank you for doing this, and to ask you if there's anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to.
No, I think, the beauty of this is that I think we hit all around it, but education and knowledge around type 1 is the key. And like this lady you just mentioned, is that hopefully now the next time she will have learned from her talk with you and about how to address that situation, and then next time won't be as afraid to handle that. So, you don't do that unless you share stories, you share information, you share data, you share whatever to help people feel more empowered and more knowledgeable and more comfortable dealing with the day-to-day stuff. So this type of blog is fantastic, and podcast, and it's fantastic in being able to do that. So I encourage you to keep it up.
I appreciate that. And let me be encouraging back to you, from all of us out here, if you could please continue to fight with the formulary people. We would all really appreciate that. So
we have no choice. We have no choice but to do that. But yes, certainly we'll continue that. It's not really something to laugh about, because it is a serious issue, and it is. I unfortunately have to answer questions about that on a daily basis, and it's a whole different healthcare landscape than it used to be even 5 years ago. So we're really trying to. Our goal is that we do everything we can to work with the payers to be able to have patients have access to the products that we make. So
no, you certainly don't. You certainly don't make them not to sell them, I would imagine. So
correct.
Yeah. And it's hard for a person like myself, who I don't have trouble getting on the phone with somebody and loudly advocate and cursing in between my loud advocations for my daughter. But it's not that easy for everyone to make their case, to keep their argument coherent while someone on the other end is pushing back. Sometimes you just don't have the energy after being up all night for 7 years with your kid to then, take the 3 hours you have during the day to argue for your insulin or for your insulin pump or whatever it ends up being. And I think that the insurance companies count on that to some large degree for us not fighting back. And that's why, we hope you guys are fighting back, kind of on our behalf. So,
every day.
Yeah, I appreciate that personally. So thank you very much for coming on. I genuinely appreciate you taking the time.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you. Have a good one. Take care.
Thanks to Todd. Thanks to Novo Nordisk. Thanks to the JDRF. Thank you, OmniPod, for sponsoring the episode. Thanks to my mom for being my mom. Thank you to you guys for listening to the podcast. Thank you. That's all I got to say. That's it. Ooh, except for there's links to the books in the show notes. You should check that out too. See ya.